Welcome to our latest Broadcast Revolution event. It's so lovely to see so many people come down today. My name is Ashley Carroll. I am the Deputy Head of News at Broadcast Revolution. Before I joined the company, I worked at Global, reading and writing the news on stations like Heart, Capital and LBC News, as well as doing the spot and producing. And it was in that same newsroom where I met this gentleman,
there we go.
Who doesn't really need an introduction.
Well, I don't know that.
But Nick Ferrari.
Oh yes. Hi, hello. Hi.
Your career began in news reporting, working
Right.
for the Sunday Mirror, the
Yes.
Sun, and the Daily Mirror, to name but a few.
Yes. That's what. Yes.
This is a little bit of days of our lives here.
Yeah.
Back in 1989, you were hired to launch the Sky News Channel.
I was. That's
You
true.
went to New York to do Fox TV.
I was a member of Fox TV. Yes. I'm slowly losing the audience. I think. There we go.
A bit of live TV back in the UK,
yeah,
which
that-
I'm not massively
That would
familiar
be
with. But we'll,
topless darts.
Okay,
So I've just lost another chunk of the
we'll keep
audience.
going, don't worry. And
There we
talk radio
No show
as
too
well.
low for me. No show too low for me.
Well, let's talk about LBC 97.3 was what it was called when you joined
Yep.
in 2001.
Yep.
Then in 2014, the station went nationwide with
Yep.
LBC standing for Leading Discussion Conversation.
Absolutely right. Yep.
Now you all have a chance to ask Nick your questions this evening.
Yep.
I want to start though by saying congratulations on the
Oh, right.
latest radar figures.
Oh, right.
LBC's grown in reach, hours and share in the past quarter.
Absolutely nothing to do with me. I'm sure.
Well, it's added 270,000 listeners,
Extraordinary.
3.3 million people tune in every week, and LBC's Nick Ferrari at breakfast now has 1.4 million people listening.
Remarkable. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I mean, Nick, I think first question
Right.
is, what's this increase down to?
Well, first off, thank you very much for having me, Ashley and Phil, thank you. It's very, very busy in the world of news and politics, which is what I do at the moment. And I'm sure it's busy in your world, so it's nice to sort of have a break and have a bit of time off and a bit of time to sort of relax and reflect. As Michael Gove, my Uber driver, said on the way in today. And if you should worry, Jeremy Hunt's taking me back, so that's how it's going with the Conservatives. And what a turnout. This is the sort of audience that Piers Morgan would dream of. I'm very grateful that you... But there will be plenty more digs against Piers, don't worry, who I absolutely adore and love. What is it down to? Well, it's down to knowing your audience. It's down to very clever programming. And it also has to be said that it's down, they've been doing it for 50 years, actually a whisker over 50 years, so it has developed. Let's be absolutely candid. It's had, not that I'm any difference, but many years ago, before I said it's had some very rocky times. It nearly went to the wall on at least more than one, if not two occasions. And I think under Global's control for a while, they thought this just isn't breaking through. So it has come down to really concerted effort. It's come down to an extraordinarily mixed batting lineup that you could go from me to James O'Brien, through Sheila, through Tom, through Ian, through everyone. Unless Ian's standing for Tunbridge Wells, but I think he's now decided he's not going to be. But you just never know with Ian. So it's down to that, it's down to knowing your audience, and it's probably down to, and this is where I take my hat off the team, and I hope we might explore this when we do some questions. I do think their social media offering is actually very, very good. I think they put out a lot of clips, apparently, when I start shouting at Nigel Farage or children's ministers or whatever it might be, it's out there very, very quick. So I think it's down to that, and I think it's just a change of attitude. People want to get involved. People no longer want to be spoken at, they want to have a conversation.
You said this LBC's been around for 50 years. You've been doing breakfast there for 20 years, which is ridiculous.
I totally agree, and I think the management are thinking that as well, actually. You keep that to yourself, I'd be grateful.
What time does the alarm go off, and actually, why have you done it for so long? Why stay at LBC for 20 years?
Well, that would be down to the money, nothing else, so let's get that absolutely right. They did try to hire me away. Rupert Murdoch tried to hire me away about 5 or 6 years ago, and I was offered a very, very encouraging deal to stay, and I was delighted because I genuinely, and I'm not just saying they are good people to work for, that they are very determined on their course, but when they get behind you, when they promote a station, whatever it does, it works. Why have I been doing it for so long? because despite having some extraordinary jobs, I mean, again, I only do this now because as Claire Gerard, who I've been speaking to on the radio forever, she asked me if this was my retirement party, which I thought was a little bit rude, but there we are. But you come to the point of your career where you think, well, I suppose you do need to reflect a little. So I was so ridiculously lucky. I was running a newsroom in New York for Fox, and I think I was 30 or 30, I mean, quite extraordinary. But this is, apart from being a dad, this is the best job I've ever had. I don't have to worry about anything. I don't have to worry about hiring staff, expenses, headcount, none of that shit, if you'll pardon the expression. I just have to get people engaged. So that's why I continue to do it, as long as they'll have me. And if anyone's interested, I am available in about 18 months. I'm represented by Arlington, which is Nikki at Arlington. Sorry, on you go.
Well, talk to me a bit about how LBC went from a regional station, as it was back in the day, to now one of the UK's biggest radio talk shows. How exactly did it happen, and how has your show changed during those years?
That's a very good question, because it's not just the show, it's people like you, who I used to work with, and Jeff, who I think I've met already, one of your friends who I also know, who I hope he doesn't ask a question, because apparently he once tried to come into my studio and I wasn't very welcoming. So wherever you are now, please don't put me through hell. I apologise. If there's anything I can do, therapy or something, just send me the bill. It was a fantastic decision to take LBC national. It was, I mean, again, I'm just speaking as a presenter. I'm not a strategist, or I'm not even on the staff, really. But it was really the only way they could go, because they'd already got the thick end of 1 million in London, population of about 8.5. So if you're going to grow it, that's probably what you should do. What it meant for us, actually, was that the story selection became a little tougher. So candidly, whereas before, when it was London Broadcasting Company, if 3 libraries in Barnet closed, we could probably do that as a story. Well, now, unfortunately, 3 libraries have to go up in flames for us to do a story like that, because we have to be aware of what the rest of the country is thinking. But if you look at what it's meant, you know, for me, I went from having about 850, I've added about 600,000 outside of London. And again, if I had one of my colleagues here, we could tell you that once you start pushing out of the M25, and certainly you start going up to some of those big northern towns, and bizarrely, well, I don't, bizarre, that's the wrong word, but interestingly, Scotland, it is an extraordinarily powerful listen. So it was a great idea and it's worked. And, you know, as you very kindly referenced, the numbers that LBC enjoy.
And talk to me then about some of the highlights. Looking back, what have been your favourite interviews?
Oh, do you know the ones I like, genuinely the ones I like best are the callers, because those are the ones that you just never know what's going to happen. You kind of know when you, I interview a hell of a lot, particularly at the moment, I interview a hell of a lot of politicians, and they are so skilled and schooled, they have a message to get across. They'll tell you that something, well, so you'll say, you know, Mr. Sunak, don't you think it's appalling that you're a D-Day deserter and you want to bring in national service, but you can't talk to blokes who are in their 90s and 100s? And he'll say, well, I think the question that the public are actually interested in, Nick, is this. And you just think, fuck off. But you can't actually say it. Well, I could, but it would be the end of that 20-year career. So I kind of know, so the calls that stick with me are, honestly, the listeners' calls. When we were, I mean, there's a couple of, and it totally changed the mood of the room now. Some of you will remember, oh God, what was his name now is John Radford. He was known as the Black Cab Rapist. He's called John Radford, I can't remember what his first name, anyway, he's changed his name. And he's this vile guy who assaulted women in black taxis. You might vaguely remember it. Typically he'd said he was celebrating something, he'd give the young woman a drink, the drink was laced, she'd pass out, and then I'd, you know, fill in the blanks. And we were doing this story, and he was due to come up for parole, and you know, I was saying, this is ridiculous, how can this be, appalling, awful. I think there's about 15, 20 victims that we know of, by the way. One of whom is a very well-known victim, we might get that into questions later. And this young woman phoned up, and she said that you know, she wanted to talk about it, and she felt it very personally. So obviously, you know, many of you are journalists in the room. It's who, what, where, when, why, how. Then you can write any story in the world. Who, what, where, when, why, how. Boom, boom, boom. You've got it. That's all you need. Right at the end of the world. So I knew who she was. I know what she was talking about. So tell me. Actually, her name was Melanie, but I think it was a cover name in truth. Melanie, why is this so important to you? So there was this long pause. And she said, because I'm one of the victims. I said, oh my God. And then, obviously we didn't go into detail. And she said, I just actually feel it's been so cathartic to talk to you. I haven't even said this to some of my girlfriends. And I said, well, that I won't forget that for a long time. And the other call, to come back to you, what is the thing I like, is when people, so I have to give a little bit of my life. If I expect you to share some of your life, I've got to give some of my life. And so people know that I'm divorced, I've got 2 boys, I've got a partner now, I've got this, that, the other. And we were talking about the importance of Holocaust. And this woman phoned up from North London. I remember her name to this day. She was Rachel. And this was many years ago when we were saying how important it was to remember Holocaust. And she was a Jewish woman, very heavily accented. And she's saying it's very important, and I won't do the accent because it's not appropriate. And I said again, I said, well, why is this so important to you? And she said, because, Mr. Ferrari, I was in Auschwitz. And I was a 14-year-old girl. So it was some years ago, as you can remember, obviously from the years now. And can you imagine what I went through? And I said, I don't even want to think. So we talked a little bit, again, generally, because people are listening. And then I said, and I'll never forget this, never forget this. And I think if I've achieved anything, this is what I've achieved, nothing to do with the politicians. And I said, what do your grandchildren say when you tell them that you were in Auschwitz? And she said, I've never told them. I've never spoken to my grandchildren about this. And I said, well, why are you telling me that now? And she said 2 things. Because I trust you, and I think it has to be made known. And I thought, if I get that level of trust with these people, this woman who'd endured so much, as we now know, she was coming towards the end of her life, she wanted to make sure, if she could, that nobody ever forgot the Holocaust. And she shared with me stories. And that is that, honestly, we can talk about Diane Abbott, we can talk about Nigel Farage, and there are funny stories about all of that, but those are the calls that stick with me.
And when you get those types of sensitive calls, because I understand the show is very structured, you have guests coming on at a certain time, will you make changes to the schedule to allow these people time to tell their story? Great question, that's what I love. And I don't know if you ever sat in on the production, but you must know some of the producers, so it changes by the minute. Just briefly, because I often get asked this, so just ahead of it now, I get up at about 5:30 in the morning, but we have already set up the previous, at least the first hour of the show the previous night. So my phone, we have what's called a setup producer. It's a he today, but he starts about 2 in the afternoon, works till about 10. So we know what we're going to do at 7, and we know what we're going to do at 7:30. But we've gone to air, and we've got nothing else planned. And we just plan on the day, which I find so exciting. I don't know if my production team would say it's exciting, but I find it exciting. And then also we'll just throw things out. So you get a call, or we spoke, again, I've referenced it earlier, we spoke to Nigel Farage, and he suddenly took us in a different direction, and you're just throwing stuff out the window, and you're going it. And I do think if there's anything we do, we are probably, because, well, you know how tight the staffing is. You saw them, there's only 3 of us, well, and the great teams who answer the phone. I mean, we just spin on a dime and just change. So that's very regular we do. I mean, I can't think of a day when we don't throw something out the window, story-wise. Well, I don't know if this is difficult for you, but I sometimes feel like with the listeners, they're a bit like people on Twitter, that they will say whatever they want, and it can be quite nasty and a bit personal to you. How do you deal with that when you get the insult?
I love it. Hold on a second, you've got to remember, right? So for 12 and a half years, I worked for Rupert Murdoch in various jobs. 6 or 7 of those years I worked for a bloke called Kelvin Mackenzie. There's no insult, I've been married twice as well, right? There's no insult that can be levelled at me that I've not heard already. I simply don't get, they just make me laugh. I mean, some of them, unfortunately, I can't read because there's too many swear words. But I always try. There's 3 people who hate me with a passion. It burns in their inner soul. I know their names. It's Lukash, Sean, and Wayne. And they loathe me. And sometimes I get up in the morning, oh, Christ, I'm getting too old for this. I've actually unbelievably finally paid off the mortgage after paying off all these wives. Why am I going to work? I'm going to work to see what Lukash, Sean and Wayne hate about me today. I love it. And it really doesn't get to me. I think it's fantastic. Fantastic.
I've got to ask you about Diane Abbott, because I think for me, I remember being in the newsroom when she came on. I mean, it is an iconic interview, perhaps not for her, but basically for anyone that doesn't remember, she was the shadow Home Sec. She came on to talk in the run-up to the general election, and she got everything wrong when it came to figures on policing, I believe.
Yeah.
Did you have any idea? I mean, what was going through your mind at that time, and did you have any idea at the time that this was going to make headline news? Because it really did. It just blew up.
I'll back into that. So did I? Yes, I realised as it unfolded and the way it did, having news edited The Sun and being deputy editor of the Daily Mirror, I could even almost envisage the headlines. But here's the story, which I've told a few times, but not everybody knows. I never wanted to do that interview. Never wanted to do that interview. And I was bullied into it by my producer, Maz. I don't know if you remember. Yeah, you remember Maz. Great woman. Fantastic, really great producer. It's during an election. And the reason I didn't want to interview Diana, but I'm very happy to tell you, is that she was terrible at keeping early morning bookings. So, terrible. So this was a pre-election period, and we were going to talk about police cuts or something. Diane Abbott's booked for 7:20. Fantastic. Of course, it gets to 7:19, 7:20, 7:21, 7:22. We can't get Diane Abbott. For fuck's sake, why do we keep booking this woman? So, I come in on that Tuesday morning, and there's Diane Abbott, and I mean, it's friendly, but it's quite robust. It's friendly. It's a friendly dictatorship. Mine is a friendly. And I said, pardon my language, but it's a news. For fuck's sake! I've told you, I will not want Diane Abbott. I'm not doing her. And Maz was a brilliant producer. She just went very quiet for a while. Very quiet. She had this brilliant trick. Nick, what is it? Do you know what? You'd make my life absolute hell if you do the Diane Abbott interview. Why have I got to? Because we're not got enough minutes about Labour and da-da-da-da, and then I'll have to do this and then I'll have to do it. You want me to do it? Yes, I want you to do it. All right, okay, just put it on. I swear I did zero preparation for it, honestly. I sat down, someone said it's Diane Abbott after. Have you got, can you give me the press release? I promise I'll give it back. So the press release was just put in front of me like that. Honestly, Diane Abbott joins me now to talk about policing figures. So Diane Abbott, okay, how many police officers have you got? Absolute zero interest. And then it just completely fell apart. And as I've said, it was like, I was in a boxing room just watching her punch herself continually in the face. And I'm just in the other corner. It was extraordinary. I got awards for all of that, but it all just happened by pure bloody. I didn't even want to do the bloody interview. That's the truth of the matter.
So it did fall apart for her. She really did drop the ball. When have you dropped the ball?
Oh, Christ, oh, goodness me. So many times have I dropped the ball.
Really?
Yeah, shit, yeah. I've been fired for some fantastic jobs. I'm trying to think of a story that I can tell that doesn't get too offensive. Yeah, this one's quite funny, and it's true. So I'm director of programs for Live TV. Maybe some of you were students when Live TV, and most of you weren't even born. But the idea of Live TV, it was a cable station, it was run by the Mirror Group, and we had to do alternative programming, so there were kind of programs. And then I used to run these 2-minute bits of nonsense, like girls playing topless darts, or I know the world has moved on, this was the 90s, what do we call this, a person of minimal height, who would do the weather on a mini trampoline, and he couldn't reach Aberdeen, so he'd bounce up and down. So he'd say, in Maidstone it's going to be sunny, in Birmingham, Aberdeen. So it was Benny Hill. Basically, look, it was Benny Hill. These were the only things that rated, for Christ's sake. So the other thing we did, and I'll keep this because there are a lot of young women in the audience, but anyway, we had something called the weather in Norwegian, okay? Which was 2 minutes of this woman, I remember her name to this day, Eva Bjørtnes, who was a stunning-looking Norwegian girl who would be in full evening wear with the long white gloves, drop earrings, everything like that. Now, the weather in Norwegian. And she would start, and across the bottom it would say, it's snowing in Maidstone, it's da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. People found it quite funny, got a lot of press. She went on holiday, this is an absolutely true story. She went on holiday, and I had to find someone. And I remember this woman's name. I found Margareta Högborg, who was a Swedish girl. Okay? And now, for 2 weeks, the weather in Swedish with Margareta Högborg. It's snowing in Maidstone. Right. So she goes, I don't speak Swedish. It's been going. It's a week in, and I get a phone call on a Saturday afternoon at 3 from someone, I think his name, it's called John Chapman. Hello, Nick, it's John Chapman from the News of the World. It's 3 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. How are you? Well, I was okay, but I've got a sense that might change. Mate, I will bike all the translations around. Margarita Hergborg. She does sometimes do the weather. At other times, she's actually a prostitute. She works out of Streatham, and she's saying she offers certain services for 20 quid, other services 50 quid, and the whole 9 yards for 100 quid without VAT. And sorry, mate, and I did actually know, we'd worked on this, I need a comment. Oh, fuck, that's not the comment. I'll have to ring Kelvin McKenzie. I'll have to ring Kelvin. I can't ring him up. So you asked me mistakes I've made. So I ring him up, and the great thing about newspaper editors, and I did actually wake Kelvin up to tell him that Diana died. I've woken him up, and they never ever, it's just always, what's happening? They just want to, what's happening? What's up? Everything all right, man? Kelvin, we might have a bit of a problem with Margarita Hergborg. Oh yeah, what's that, man? Well, the News of the World have got, obviously, somebody who's Swedish, yeah. And, I mean, a lot of the time she's been talking about it snowing in Maidstone, and it's, but a couple of times, and I won't say the practice, but she's offering this for a tenner and something else for 50 quid, and by God, what you'll get for £100 is going to make your eyes water. So there's a pause, and he says, "What did you ask at the interview?" And I said, "Well, Kelvin, no." And in fairness, boss, no. I mean, I've never asked anyone if they're a prostitute. I mean, I'm so quick as this. He said, right. They want a statement. Yeah, that's it, Kelvin. That's right. I'm sorry, Barney. Okay, right. Say the following. Live TV take these allegations very seriously. An immediate inquiry has been launched, which will be headed by Director of Programmes, Nick Ferrari, who's immediately suspended on triple pay. So I phoned the News of the World back, and they said, "This is fantastic. This will, a page lead. A page lead is a bigger, so it's going to be like a column." He said, "That will make it a page lead," and I've still got it at home. And by the way, I didn't get triple pay. I did not get triple pay, but that's a true story. Yeah. And I had to sack her the next day, which was an interesting conversation.
What about at LBC?
I've never done anything like that at LBC. I have never done anything like that. They've got a business to protect. Yeah, go on.
Ofcom complaints, they happen.
Yep.
Do you get a telling off from the boss, or is it again
on the phone? Yeah, of course you do. I've had one that was upheld against me, which was through my own stupidity. There are extenuating circumstances, but it's so long ago that we will go into if you want to, but it is so long ago, I sense we probably won't. Yeah, when you get an Ofcom complaint, you are taken into an office, and they're very friendly, but they walk you through it, and they listen to what you have to say, and then a defence is made. So I'm not going to be glib about that. Yeah, I mean, Ofcom, ultimately, Ofcom controls the station's licence. They certainly have quite a stake in my future. So yeah, I mean, people moan, and I think there are some criticisms that could be levelled at Ofcom, but I don't envy them what they have to do, and I think they do it pretty well.
And obviously you're so...
Did we all get that on tape, by the way? If we can send that, I'd be very grateful if that young woman could get that straight over to Ofcom.com or whatever it is.
I mean, you know how it goes.
Ofcom.com.
The staff is so well trained, but often with callers, you never quite know what's going to come out of their mouths, and there's always that concern that they're going to say something that they shouldn't be saying. What's the process, just to make sure you guys are covering your bags? Okay, so there's something called, which, I'm sorry, this is obviously for radio folk, obviously like you, but it's mildly interesting, and there's a mildly entertaining story about it. There's something called a 7-second delay. So I didn't start the answer to the question, to Ashley's question about 7 seconds ago. And the idea is, if you ring up and you're going to talk about Rishi Sunak leaving the Normandy beaches, the only thing we've got on trust on you really is, well, thank you very much indeed, we'll call you right back, what's your number? And we hope that if you give your number, we'll you'll be... So that's all we've got, except for the 7-second delay. Now, what I can't share with you, because it's a trade secret, so I can't possibly tell you, that once you press the button, and what happens is, somebody says, Rishi Sunak's taking drugs, right? And anyway, he won't win because Rishi Sunak's taking drugs. I can press a button, they can press a button on the other side of the glass. You're listening to LBC 97.3, so you don't hear any of that. What I can't tell you, by part of my contract, is that for about 15 minutes is wide open when it's gone. So if you're really smart, Charlie would come in and say, Rishi Sunak is taking drugs, You're listening to LBC. The next caller would come in and say, Keir Starmer's seeing a Swedish prostitute down in Streatham, where he gets whatever you like for 100 quid, and we'd be wide open. There's nothing we can do.
Does anybody remember a politician called David Mellor, who was a Conservative? Oh, gosh, you do. Okay. So, so this is a fantastic story. Were you working? Do you remember this story?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantastic story. So David Mellor's long-term partner got an award of some sort. Her name was Penny. They went out and celebrated on a Sunday afternoon. He admits he had a glass of rosé or whatever too many. He gets in a London taxi. When he wakes up, he lives in Wapping. The taxi driver says that'll be 35 quid gov. David Mellor completely loses. That's a fucking outrage. How dare you? You're a fucking cheat. It should only been 20. Basically throws 35 quid, storms out of the taxi, right? Now, taxi driver then does what all taxi drivers do, which is immediately ring the Sun newspaper to say that I've just had David Mellor and he's told me every name under the sun. Now, this was like on a Tuesday, and this is before LBC went national, so it was very much a London station, and I think you could say that we've moved on, but we had a lot of taxis, drivers, and a lot of people in taxis who listened. One of whom's just leaving now to get his cab. And so there was something that they had to address. So the management said, look, we would ask you, we can't order you, but no, Mellor said, I know I've got to say this, it's been bouncing around for 2 or 3 days, I've got to address this. So the show starts. He used to do a show with Ken Livingstone on a Saturday morning at 10. Ken Livingstone, David Mellor, called whatever it was called, and it would always, for whatever reason, Ken would always start, show David Mellor. And Mellor would always come, and he always used to call him my dear friend or my partner or something like that, and Kenneth. Before we go any further, I feel I must address the elephant in the room. I went out in the week, many of the listeners will know this already, and I have behaved in an inappropriate way. And while I will hold that the taxi driver did completely cheat me because I fell asleep, I also fully accept that I shouldn't have called him a fucking idiot. Boom, so boom. You're listening to LBC 97.3. The producer, David. You can't say fuck on the radio. Coming back to you in 3, 2, 1. Remember what I told you earlier? 3, 2, 1. David. Do you know, I've just been told, I apologise again. I've just said fuck on the radio. And it went out. It absolutely went out, yeah. So those are the systems that we have. Hopefully you're not going to, but yeah, we always fall foul of somebody. We all do.
I think it was back in 2003 when the then London Mayor Ken Livingstone once said, Nick Ferrari has built a reputation on controversy and arguments. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I think I probably, yeah, yes, I think I probably do. I think people want a discussion, don't they? I think, look, as long as you can as long as there's an intellectual basis to what the presenter's going to say, what the caller's going to say, there was a sort of an incarnation of talk radio speech radio many years ago, when they were just offensive and people were just calling it. I mean, that's not particularly intellectual. I think if you can make an argument, then hopefully you hook people in, they have a view, and then if you're lucky, they're going to engage by, hopefully, best of all, come on the radio. Otherwise, you know, the many thousands of texts and tweets and everything else we get.
But it's fair to say you don't always go easy on your guests, particularly politicians. Are you worried that your interview technique might put people off from coming on the show?
Well, the only one who won't come on is London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who now, what are we entering? The 11th year where he refuses to talk to me. Absolutely refuses point blank. And it didn't matter to me. But it's upsetting for my listeners because I'd really like to give them the opportunity, because I think while there are some things for which you can commend Mayor Khan, I do think he's got a lot to answer for. I think there are many things in this city. Some have gone forward, a lot have gone backwards, and a lot of my listeners would like the opportunity and they'll never get it. In fairness, actually, he's the only one. Sometimes it takes a bit of a while to entice them on. You know, I think we've already had Rishi and Keir. I think we're going to get them, well, I know we're going to get them again before the election. And I mean, all I'm there, this sounds so highfalutin, but I'm there for you, right? So I'm not there to sort of swallow whatever they say, and I'm there to think. So if you come to the example of the Conservative minister who's advocating how great children's allowance is going to be, and I'm thinking of a couple of young parents thinking, oh Christ, and the girl's just fallen pregnant, what is children's allowance? It seems a fair question to say, well, how much is children's allowance? And of course, they never seem to know the answer to the most basic. It's quite extraordinary. They never know the answer to the most basic of questions.
It is ridiculous. Is it just frustrating to you when you have these politicians on the show and they just don't have their facts in hand?
I think it's more jaw-dropping, actually. I mean, let's be fair. So we've rubbished the Conservatives. I have to say, Labour came on with this great idea that all primary school children are going to get free school breakfasts. Fantastic idea, because it helps them. So you speak to the shadow minister, and she's outlining what it's going to be, and da-da-da-da. And then you say the simple question, so how many breakfasts a day will it be? Well, this is a very important policy, because this means that people will have better educational attempt. That's great, isn't it? But how many breakfasts is it, Shadow Minister? Well, I think what you're asking me is it going to be muesli or cornflakes? No. What I'm actually asking you, and again, they just don't know. And when you think, I mean, right, it's not like I've suddenly stopped her in the street, right? Or indeed, the man, the Conservative, he's come out to talk about how more people are going to benefit from children's allowance. She's come out to talk about how all primary school, I mean, that is their day in the sun. That is their brief. It's, to me, it seems extraordinary. So I'm just trying to, it's not deliberately trying to pull the rug from it, it's just trying to find facts, basic facts. Who, what, where, when, why, how. You can do any story in the world. Who, what, where, when, why, how.
You need to tell them that.
Yes.
During your 20 years then, you've had 7 prime ministers?
I have.
Have you interviewed them all? Who's been your most favourite?
I have interviewed all but Tony Blair.
Oh.
All of them when I was 20, sorry, when I did my 20 years, they all sent a audio clip, and Global gave a great champagne reception, and I overtook Chris Tarrant, which was quite an achievement. He'd done 18 and a half, and Chris Tarrant, they did a video for me, and Chris Tarrant was at home, and he says, congratulations, at last someone has overtaken. And it's so good to see you've kept yourself in the peak of physical conditioning as you've managed that, which is very good. They also, and the most moving actually was Gordon Brown, really was, which is who we used to. I mean, politics is a contact sport. They know that, and well, apart from Sadiq Khan or whatever. And we used to, but his was a tremendous because he said something along the lines of, the 20 years there've been, 20 years there've been 7 prime ministers, 8 chancellors, 6 home secretaries, but only 1 Nick Ferrari. Which was a really considerably better than the line Boris gave. Well, I still don't think he knew who I was, but anyway, he did. Aye. 2. He did his best.
Are you and Boris friends? Is that right? Do you have a friendship?
Well, I mean, define friend. I mean, do I go round his house? I don't go round his house every week, but have we been out for meals? Yes. Have I known him for more than 20 years through journalism circles? Yes. Have we had some fantastic nights out together? Yes.
Do you want to tell us about some of them?
Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, no, this is all how. Yeah. Well, you might not want to hear about them. No, I don't think they do. Do you think they want to hear? Yeah. So, okay. Best one. Here's the best one. Well, no, there are many. There are many. Let me start with this one. So he decided, a long time ago, David Cameron briefly talked to me about possibly running to be the Mayor of London. Long time ago, many years ago. And my radio career was kind of bouncy, and I thought, well, that actually might be a bit of fun. And I looked at it, but then I looked at the situation of corruption within City Hall, and I was appalled. There was none. Well, what is the point of having a job like that if you're not going to get golf clubs, awards, and free holidays? So I said, that's absolutely not for me, thank you very much. But then a few years later, Boris is doing phone-in. That's a joke, by the way. Boris is doing phone. Didn't go down particularly well, that one. Boris, I didn't know this was a legal convention. I didn't come to. Boris was the mayor, and he used to come in and see us every other week. And we finished. It was called Ask Boris, which took us a long time to work that out, but we got it. It's quite fortunate that we managed to find a mayor called Boris. So it's called Ask Boris. And at the end of one of them, he said to me, and his man comes in to collect him. Okay, Mr. Mayor. And Boris says, I need to speak with Nick for a moment, if I can speak for a moment privately. So his aide runs out. My people, this is not going out on air, by the way, obviously. My people flick a switch, they're going to listen to every bloody word. It's an absolutely true story. So Boris says to me, now, Nick, I need to tell David Cameron, I'm going to go back, I'm going to be an MP, and I need someone to put forward, and I think you would be great, come on, do it, you should. And he said, and I still tease him about this, stop sitting there like some great fat Buddha, and just say, you will do it. And I said, and I always used to call him Mr. Mayor on air, but Boris off. And I said, well, I mean, that's very kind of you. I'm honestly, I'm hugely sort of, but I'll be honest, mate. If you think I really want to spend all Thursday afternoon sitting in a room in City Hall, trying to work out how I can get another Oyster card reader into Penge East. I'm sorry, but I don't give a fuck. Do you think I do? So I said, all right, I've tried to do it nicely. Look, my marriage has gone away, okay. I'm running around town with someone I shouldn't be running around town with. The last thing I need is to come out of a club or something like that as the mayor of London with this girl, picture. It's an absolute nightmare. I just can't handle it because of what I'm doing, you know, out of my marriage. To which I swear, ladies and gentlemen, he looked at me and said, my dear chap, compared to me, you are but a schoolboy. Absolutely true story. But I didn't go for it. Why didn't I go for it? Oh, because it just would have been a bloody nightmare and it was all of that. So yes, he is a friend. I found him hugely entertaining. He completely screwed it up. I mean, this is interesting. Here's a sort of the only serious point I'll make, because you're all doing brilliantly in the range of industries. So you all know there are leaders and there are managers. And many leaders can't manage, and many managers can't lead because there's a different skill set. And he's your chief executive, he's not your chief financial. Rishi Sunak is not the chief executive, by the way, he's the chief financial officer. They didn't put the right people around him. They will rue this for generations. They will never have an 80-seat majority. It might actually be the end of the Conservative Party because they didn't put the right people around him and he just screwed up time after time after time. Having said that, he is a friend.
So, when he comes on the show, when he was Prime Minister, pandemic, Partygate,
yep.
All of that, how did you navigate those tricky questions?
No, all bets are off then.
Yeah.
And he knows. Oh no, and he fully accepts it. Accepts it. I mean, there's fantastic times when, again, when he was mayor, and he was bringing in a new raft of fares, and I said, just suppose you accidentally, I didn't say current wife, but your wife has sent your suit off to the dry cleaners. You haven't got your Oyster card, and you have to get from Regent's Park, where you live, to London Bridge. How much is that fare going to be? Well, I don't know. Well, no, you might. I mean, £2. No, it's nothing. And I think I said, Mayor, it's £5.80. To which he said, dear God, who sets these fares? And I said, well, you do. And another time, when he said he was going to go to Uxbridge, I said, of course, this is a great story. He said, you'll know, Mr. Mayor, that a very, very famous football player was born just outside Uxbridge. No, you're going to tell me. He's the only man at this time to have scored a hat-trick in the World Cup final. He's the man who brought it home in 1966. At that time, the only player, actually still the only player to score an open play, a hat-trick in the World Cup final. Of course you know who I'm talking about here. Yes, of course, it's Martin Charlton. Jeff Hurst, by the way. But he just, extraordinary how he gets through it all. Extraordinary.
You might be chatting to your 8th Prime Minister in a few weeks' time,
I
maybe?
might well, yes.
How much of the show...
Well, no, I will be, let's
yes.
face it. Or am I not meant to say that? Is this going out live? Oh, there's so many opportunities to vote. The list of candidates is available.
They're all on the website.
Yeah, all on the website.
How much of the show is dominated by the election campaigning right now? Are you covering any other stories? And,
yeah.
How do other stories get on right now?
How do they make it?
Yeah.
They're held to a higher bar.
Yeah.
So I'm quickly thinking the only stories I can remember that weren't elected today was the appalling figure that 380,000 people have been waiting 5 years for cancer treatment. I mean, that would normally probably be, pardon this language, front page news. It can't be at the moment. So yes, the story has to be a little bit bigger because we have to accommodate. I mean, this is quite interesting again, not necessarily that we want this to be discussed openly. I've never seen all broadcasters give as little coverage as to the Lib Dems as they have. They've always been this sort of ridiculous phony war that it could be Sir Keir, it could be, well, we all know it's not going to be Sir Dave because he'll probably have drowned by the time we get there. Highly unlikely he'll actually get to it. But we just seem to accept that we can kind of marginalise them, but there's still, and you know as well as I do, if anybody, you have to balance everything. So I appear on This Morning a lot, and they asked me to review the, it wasn't really a debate last night, was it? It was like a sort of town hall event, which I thought Beth Rigby was bloody great at. And you hear yourself saying, well, Keir Starmer would have been disappointed by da-da-da-da-da. But then, of course, Rishi would have been disappointed by da-da-da. These are the most extraordinary rules that date back to the idea that if I was to suddenly indicate that I thought that you should all vote Conservative or Lib Dem, I'm going to somehow rig the election. It's a remarkable bloody set of rules we live by. But yeah, you're right. The news agenda for the next, what have we got? 3 weeks is very different. I mean, the day of the election, the day of the election, I mean, that is the day to listen, because we're not allowed to do any political stories. So I think we've got macrame for the first hour, which I'm very excited about. Then a Swedish prostitution. No. No, I mean, we just fill it with the biggest pile of shit you can ever think.
But can branded spokespeople, do they fit into this time? So are you looking for any branded spokespeople when it comes to election campaigning? If this is what's dominating the news agenda, how can branded voices get in on the conversation? By being incredibly nimble and really what people are talking about. There would have been, I would have thought, extraordinary opportunities from what went wrong with D-Day. I don't know how, but I don't even know if this company still exists, but something like Sea-Link or whatever it might be, if they still exist. I don't know, a bloody ferry company. I mean, there is the most extraordinary opportunity to get involved, to get somebody on there. We actually, our whole, I mean, this is a charity, but all of LBC's coverage was credited to, is it the London Taxi Drivers Association? I can't remember. Anyway, because they drove us around. If Sea-Link, do they exist? If Brittany Ferries had decided, of course we can do that. I mean, we're not. We thank Brittany Ferries for sending our report, and we took 5 veterans, right? Of course, I'm going to say thanks to Brittany Ferries for taking my report. That's not a problem for a second. But I can't then say, by the way, they've got a very nice boat and their casino's the best on the sea. So there are huge opportunities, but it is. I would suggest it will have the biggest punch, but it's possibly the most difficult to land during election, because you'll be aware there are so many restrictions, the like of which I find quite arcane, but we have to live with them. We haven't got a choice. Talk to me a bit more about some of the new voices who have recently joined LBC. We've got Carol Vorderman, Vanessa Feld, a new Sunday politics show, The Departure and Return of Ian Dale. Yes. There's a lot happening in the last couple of months. There is, yeah. Poor old Ian. For those of you who don't know, Ian's an absolutely tremendous presenter who did a shift on LBC and then said, and it was a genuinely tearful farewell, that he was off because he tried before to be a Conservative MP. He's a ferociously strong Conservative. He'd worked with David Davis and others, so it was a very emotional farewell that he gave on a Tuesday, that he was leaving because he'd been offered this unique opportunity to stand as MP for Tunbridge Wells, Conservative, Tunbridge Wells. I mean, I know they've got a bad night, but Christ, if they don't get Tunbridge Wells, I mean, that really is game over, isn't it? So you think, well, good luck, mate. Well done, that's fantastic. So that was Tuesday. Wednesday afternoon, the Lib Dems unearthed a podcast from only 2 years ago, in which he says, honestly, I'm only in Tunbridge Wells because of my husband. I don't understand why anyone would want to live here. On Friday, he came into the studio and announced he was standing down. And a week later, he's back on air. So, I mean, this is the rock and roll of radio. He's a top bloke. Hopefully, he would take that story in the good humour in which it's meant. But yeah, well, we had a good transfer season 2 years ago, didn't we? Andrew Marr. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic to get Andrew. And Emily as well. Emily Maitlis. So she's on the News Agent, but yeah, she's global. Global family. And John Sobel. So yeah, they had a very, very good transfer season. So it went well. It's good. But why do you think so many people have come from the BBC to global? What makes it so attractive, that move? Well, I'm not going to put it. The question you're asking is, no, I mean, obviously the answer is ask them. Having spoken with them, I think it's the sense of freedom. Yeah. I very, very briefly and very, very ungloriously worked for the BBC, hosting various shows. There was a woman called Edwina Curry, who did a late night show, Saturday and Sunday night, called Late Night Curry. It came out of Pebble Mill up in Birmingham. And there was quite a time when she was never around to do the show. We subsequently learned what she was doing with her weekends. She was having an affair with the former Prime Minister, John Major. And there's something you can't unsee. I mean, let's just remember that's now gone. So I once went on, bear in mind I'm more from the sort of commercial world that you know. So I'm on one day and I'm filling in for Edwina Curry, and you're trying to get calls, and it's 11 o'clock at night, and you're sitting in Birmingham, and it's all quiet, and nobody's ringing, right? You're going to have to give this a bit of effort. And it was during the appalling foot and mouth crisis, right? And I said, this country, what a disgrace under Tony Blair.
tourists arriving, the stench of burning cattle, trenches being dug, cattle with twisted limbs being torn in, petrol being fallen over the bodies, light, funeral pyres as tourists fly through the flames and the fumes. Is that Britain today? So the producer calls in my head, this is the BBC, Nick, balance, fuck's sake, balance. And I looked and there were some pictures, and the only thing I could, they were pictures of the family, but I tell you what, there he is with Cherie with the family. Don't they take a lovely family picture? I didn't last long at the BBC. So I think it's because they can have their say within reason. There, I mean, Christ, they're so, someone like Andrew Mars, get me this right, has forgotten more than I'll ever know about present. I mean, it's phenomenal. So they have a sense of freedom that they can do it. And interestingly enough, actually, they just say that the spirit is, despite the fact that the staffing level is probably half, if not lower than that, they actually quite like that. They just like that. There's a, you know, there's a sort of spirit, obviously, which is going to, there's no reason on earth why it should actually work. For some obscure reason, normally it does. Normally it does.
I'm going to ask you one more question,
because
I know we're running out of time, and there are so many questions still to come your way. I just want to touch briefly on podcasts.
Yep.
Because obviously, Global has the news agents, there's BBC Newscast.
Yep.
Are there any concerns that podcasts may take over someone like LBC when it comes to where people are sourcing their news? Are there any worries about the rise of podcasts for LBC?
I think that would be totally wrong if you worried about it. It's like when Times Radio arrived or Talk Radio arrives. I genuinely believe this. Competition makes you better, and if you fear it, then you're in the wrong game. I think podcasts are slightly different. They're not quite, I totally get what you're saying, and there's tremendous analysis from people like John and Emily, you know, doing what they do. So to fear something is wrong. You listen to it, you watch it, you probably learn from it without you realizing you learn from it, and that then hopefully makes you, no matter what I'm like, but it makes you put together a better show. So if ultimately the consumer, the client, the listener, whatever you want, if they are benefiting, which they will be from all these voices, then I would only see it as a positive thing. And I remember this was one of Murdoch's things he banged the desk about. You know, the minute you are frightened by competition, you're not up to the job. You should actually welcome it and be ready to take it full on. So that's what I'd say about that.
Lovely answer. Okay, well, anyone in the crowd?
I really like your honesty, your frankness. You've been around a long time. How on earth have you managed to avoid being cancelled?
Do you think she wants me to be cancelled? I mean, there's two ways. Because I've probably evolved. The show that I was doing for the first couple of years when it was owned by a different company, I certainly couldn't do now. The nation has evolved. We are far more tolerant and appreciative of people who have different lifestyles, and it would sound faintly ridiculous if I was to go against that. And I also think I've been blessed, and I'm very happy to share this with you, that I now have in my life, well, a young woman, I mean, she's 12 years younger, 15 years younger than me, so but she has two children who are a lot younger than mine. So my children are in their 30s. So I came into their lives when the girl was 12 and the boy was 8. So I've watched them go through, I listened to them, they're both extremely bright children. There was a big row once about Durham University and Rod Liddell and whether my effective stepdaughter, she was actually there, and I listened to her side of the story, and it was so illuminating, and there was stuff that never got in the papers, and she just had a different take on everything. So I think I've been absolutely blessed. I fear, without the input of the great woman who's with me, but her super kids as well, I think I would be a little more isolated. I'm also very lucky that the team around me, I mean, people sort of Ashley, I mean, so much younger. I mean, not quite my grandchildren's age, but these are so much, and I'm so fortunate. Because if you surround yourself with younger people, it makes you younger. You cannot offer old, boring views if you're sitting there. They keep me so young. There's a very simple principle that I keep at LBC. About once a month, we go out on a Friday, we go to All Bar One in Covent Garden, which opens at 10, by the way. So actually, I think I've seen a couple of you in there. And on a Friday, Prosecco's half price. I pour half a dozen, 8, 10 bottles of Prosecco down their throats. We have the most wonderful time. I leave 2 or 3 bottles on the table. I fuck off so they don't. And I just learn from them. So in a long way, I think it's because I've either luckily or tried to surround myself with young people. And without that, I think I'd have been out. Well, I would have been out on the peninsula. I think I'd have been out actually years ago. So I'm very lucky, very lucky. Oh, that was nice. Someone applauded. That was very nice. Thank you.
Okay, so...
oh, this could be trouble.
It's not very trouble, actually, because I'm Claire Gerard, so I was president of the Royal College of GPs, so I've done masses of interviews, radio, TV, and the thing I like most about your interviews is what you've actually illuminated, is that you can have a discussion, you can disagree, and I often disagree with you, but you give people time and space to open up, and that's why when I'm rung up at the crack of dawn and say, will I appear, I do appear. But my real question, it's not an issue, is that when you're talking about why you do the job and about listening to those people's stories, it's very similar to being a GP. It's unbelievably similar. I mean, no, it is a question. It's coming up.
What is it? Where's the question?
The question is, why didn't you become a GP?
There are so many reasons why, not least my intellect. I would never have got there. I mean, thank you, Claire, and thank you for always appearing on the show. There's one thing, listen out for this, and it's something that very early on my production staff today, and I'll use Claire, earlier in the show, when we were talking about the rise of breast cancer, Nick spoke to Claire Gerard, and I, no, you never speak to anybody, you speak with someone, and that is what you, the idea of speak to is banned. There's very few words that I ban, but speak to is banned because it's speak with. And it is, as I said very briefly, and I'm coming to, I couldn't be a doctor, Claire, I mean, Christ almighty, I struggled enough to get O-levels because I couldn't even spell biology, let alone bloody to pass it. But it is the incredible position that I have, that people give me that trust, that I share a little bit about my life, and then I listen to these stories. And you do have a responsibility. And very briefly, I don't know whether any of you were listening, sorry, I don't know if any of you were listening last week when we did D-Day, and I mean, you've got to be candid about it. Rishi Sunak's appalling decision. I mean, Christ knows what he was thinking to leave when he did. And then you have to keep it, to Ashley's point, you could sort of, so you do that, I think it broke at 7 actually. Anyway, there's the outrage, but you see, this is the story of the day, right? This is what people are talking about. So there's no point talking about the price of fish. Everyone wants to talk about what a plonker, so you've got to think, how do you reinvent it? You can't just, so I remember going into the 9 o'clock hours, quickly shouting through during the news, tell me what we're going to do, right? Everyone, how well do we look after our veterans? How well, right, so get me someone, how are we going to look, so the amazing team. And then we'll say, so then it comes back, it's 5 minutes after 9. So we're going to talk about, let's just move a little away from Rishi Sunak said. How well do we look after our veterans? Let's face it, we know that homelessness, it's not so acute at the moment because of the weather, but Christmas will come around, and I've got a veteran counsellor here, boom, 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 boom. And call me if you're a veteran. And within, to your point, Claire, within 10 minutes we had 2 phone calls, one of whom was a man called Lester, if any of you are listening remember this, who broke down in tears because he was having a nervous moment, he wasn't able to pay the rent, he was about to lose his job, he hadn't told his wife, and the next caller was Francesca, whose partner had that week who was ex-service, had tried to take his life and was in hospital as we spoke because he'd cut his wrists. So when you get those sort of stories, to Claire's point, I imagine it is a bit like a surgery, and then you're thinking, Christ, okay, how am I going to help these people? And you make a point, because this is where, if we're going to make anything with this show, that I say, right, and the calls, and then this is the tough part, people saying, you know, I'm crying my eyes out listening to Lester. What can I do to help Francesca? Just at the right-hand side, emails just pouring in. So then you say, right, I'm going to stop everything, right? Just stop everything. Lester, Francesca, I need you to speak to one of my colleagues, and we will do a follow-up report. And we make a point of the next day, and in fact, we did the follow-up report. We've now got each of them in programs, So, sorry, a long way, but you know, that's probably what we do, because it is to be a degree of sort of family. If these folks share so much with me that their partner has just tried to take his life, if I just say, oh, that's a terrible story, thank you very much, who's next? No. That's when you just think, Christ, you've actually got a responsibility now to look after these people, I would say. Oh, no.
We'll go to you next, don't worry.
There is a young lady down there.
We'll go down next, thanks.
Okay. Oh, this could be trying. Is that who I think it is?
I promise it's not.
Oh, this is the man I glared at. I'm so sorry.
A long time ago, you're forgiven. Ash mentioned
That didn't sound convincing, did it? That's like spat out. You're forgiven. Yeah, go on, Jeff.
Ash mentioned podcasts, and a lot of your colleagues have very successful podcasts.
Yep.
I know clips of your show are turned into podcasts, but you don't have one yet.
No.
You must have had conversations.
I have.
Why aren't you doing one? And if you did, what would the subject or passion or genre be?
I haven't, I'll be honest with you, because I haven't nailed what it is that would be different. And I don't really want to do something if it's not, I mean, I don't have to be number one, but I have to sort of be a competitor. And the other things that I do, you know, as Ash has kindly alluded, the OBC's going all right. I'm on twice a week on This Morning, which is going okay. I've got the newspaper going. So I wouldn't want to do anything that's half-hearted, but candidly, and I do owe you honesty, I haven't had the blinding idea, because there are so many out there. And again, you'll know better than I, but it strikes me that podcasts at the moment, and there are some great ones, but it is a bit like you get 100 darts and you hurl them at the board, and you just don't know how many are going to get the ball and how many aren't actually going to get the surround. So you just don't know. So it has to be absolutely finely honed. It has to have some kind of unique aspect to it. There is something genuinely, and you've reminded me that I need to pick this up, and I will after the election. Rachel Johnson has had a blinding bloody idea, Boris's sister, who I've known, you know, almost as long as I've known Boris, has had a blinding idea. If we could get the backing for it, I know it would be an absolute stonker, and I need to go back to Global and do it. And I know Rachel wants to do it. So you've actually, you've re-enthused me to do that, because I need to, let's get this election out of the way. Then I'll go and lie down on a beach somewhere for a week and be shouted at by Claire, and then we'll have another go at something else. Thank you for the question. We have a young, we've been trying to get in, here we go.
Hi there.
Hi.
My name is Cosy Howard. I work at Edelman in a PR agency for...
Edelman?
Edelman.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah.
For tech clients. So a bit more of a practical question, but
right.
You kind of mentioned earlier that you feel like a lot of your interviewees aren't very prepared. Specifically Diane Abbott and the politicians. What would you, my question is, I wonder, do LBC ever kind of share questions ahead of the interviews with, sorry, no. Sorry, no. No, that's fine, but do they ever share questions, and kind of what would be your top tip, maybe to PRs or whatever?
First, do we, all right, I'll be honest. Okay, yes. When I was interviewing some of the veterans who were in their 90s in Normandy, and they'd had a long day, the day before, did I suggest to Signaller Jones what? Yes, I did, because he's 96, he's had a long day, he was probably, I mean, they outdrunk my reporter, a couple of them. I mean, these are amazing old boys. So I want him, he's going to be on my radio show for 3 minutes, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren are listening. I want this to be something that the family will clip, that they will hold on forever, that God forbid when he goes, they'll all listen to, oh, do you remember? So yes, did I give him the 2 questions? Yes, I bloody well did, and I would again tomorrow, because I want him to come out absolutely ace performance. Would I do the same for politicians? No. Police officers, certainly not. Local councils. Sometimes you get not Claire up the back. Medical people can sometimes get nervous because they're quite frightened they're going to try and drag you into politics. So you might say, look, just assure the professor, all I'm going to ask about is the drug for breast cancer. I'm not going to ask about funding. I'm not going to ask about NICE, the organisation. So, but that's the most you'll do. The other one is so simple. It's so simple. And everybody, and I'm so lucky, as I referenced earlier, the people who come through, they are great. They work for me typically for about 2 years. They arrive, the first 6 months they can't even find the light switch. They are bloody useless. But then slowly they come through, they get the crack of it. They're great people. They go on like Maz and all the others. She's massive in Radio 4 now. They get great jobs. And it's as simple as this. Who, what, where, when, why, how. If you get the who, what, where, when, why, how of any story. So if I was prepping a minister for an interview about the price of police officers, whatever it might be, how many breakfasts, who, what, right, how many? As long as you can answer that, and this is a very simple journalistic tactic, who, what, where, when, why. You can do every story from the death of a princess, the start of a war, a general election, you'll be absolutely home and host, no problem at all. Who, what, where, when, why, how. Which all my team would do, which all my team could say. There's a young man right in front of us.
Time for maybe 2 more questions.
Oh, right, sorry.
Mike Robb from Bold Space. You have interviewed more politicians than many. There's a lot said about the calibre of politicians of all parties these days, and you've mentioned some of them. Is there a slightly more uplifting view of that? Have you interviewed anyone where you think, you know what, this person has it? Good question. Are there any that you think, you know what, there's a future here, whether they be red, blue, yellow, or otherwise?
What a great question, and oh dear. Sadly, I fear it's going the other way, because, I mean, the politicians I admired the most, sadly, the two I'm immediately going to reach for, neither of them are with us anymore. Mo Molam, who some of you might remember, and Tessa Jowell, who was just extraordinary. Let me tell you a story about Tessa Jowell, who I absolutely love. She was a Labour minister. She was put in charge after the London bombing, and it was her job to be with victims' families and look after them. And obviously, every year, they would come together to remember the events. And I've been told this by more than one person. Tessa Jowell had this incredible ability. She hadn't seen people for a year, and she would say, Ashley, how are you? So, did your sister get into university? Did she get her cello grade? Oh, I'm so excited. And how is Dave's your father? How's this incredible ability? Are there people like that now? I fear not. You look at, I mean, look, you can have great hopes. There's one who I think could actually make the cut. I'm very, very strong on Wes Streeting, who, just to help you, is the Labour. With Shadow Health, he probably will be the Labour Health. I think he actually is a good man. He has a hell of a backstory. He's beaten cancer. He's a gay guy. He's been through a lot. He represents a constituency in Romford, so a lot of that. But finally, to a very, very good question. Look, I probably would have asked the question. I almost have sympathy now for MPs, because why would you go into this for relatively not great money? I know, all right, 160 grand, thank you very much, but compared to what these people could do, because you're going to be asked all the intimate questions, you're going to be asked what kind of shoes you wear, you're even going to be asked almost how much money your mum and dad had in the bank. And you just start to think, is there a point at which we're just going to scare off good people? Because, you know, my job anyway. I didn't really want to do it because I didn't want my children reading about the fact I'm running around town with someone else. Not that I would have been a good mayor, I'd have been a bloody awful mayor, and London would be an even worse place than it is now. It would be absolutely horrific. But you just have to think whether we are going a little bit too far. So, great question. Sadly, I don't see a great crop, but there will be such a cull of the Blue Squad in 3 weeks' time that maybe new blood will come through there.
Nice. One more question. I think this lady here, Ella. Sorry, I'm pointing at you, lady in the white top, 3 rows, that's it.
Hi,
hello.
Helen Robinson-Gordon, I'm from the British Medical Association.
There's a lot of doctors in the house. If I'm going to have a heart attack, this is the place!
I'm absolutely not a doctor.
Oh. Psychiatrist. All right, I'm just into the spirit.
A few weeks ago, you were interviewing one of our junior doctors, and you said on air that you would never interview them again until the strike was settled. Was that a decision you made at the time, or was that something you went into the interview knowing that you were going to say?
Well, is it Helen or Ellen? Helen. Well, rather embarrassing, I have subsequently interviewed junior doctors, actually. I think it was a response to the way that interview was going. It's interesting that I felt, did you watch the Sky News event last night? I thought one of the ways that he lost his way was when he tried to take on the junior doctor. I think politicians underestimate the support for doctors at their peril. Having said that, I have to represent to you, I don't know if you are a junior doctor, a lot of my listeners are saying enough is enough is enough. 30, and I know we don't want it one hit, but they say 35%, this is bloody ridiculous, da, da, da. So you kind of have to be on two sides. But if I said that it was possibly in an attempt to elicit a response, I will happily have junior doctors back on the show. It does strike me that it's desperately unfortunate that a group of people who need we need so much. I mean, even respectfully, even Keir hasn't got the solution. He says, well, we'll get all in a room. Well, okay, we'll all get in a room. That doesn't solve it either. So I don't think either party has found their way through. I'd love to think that we can find a solution. And certainly, you know, the work that you or they or whatever they do, I would never demean that. So the last question has been the bouncer that's got me out. It's taken my, it's taken my middle stump straight out, if we talk a cricket analogy.
Well, I am sorry, we are going to have to end things now. Please stick around. We have wine, we've got beer, we've got soft drinks. Nick, I believe you're going to stay for a drink or two?
Yeah, of
so
course.
If, I know you have a question, so I'm sure Nick will be really happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much.